Hey, welcome back to the Christmas clatter. Listen to me.
That's a good way to start out, buddy.
That's a good way to start. Welcome back to On the Porch. I'm Todd, and joined as always by my friend Ken. I was just talking about Christmas clatter, and it's just on my mind. But Ken, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, buddy. Just hanging out here at the house it's rained all day here.
Yeah, we've had it off and on, but for you guys that don't know, me and Ken had a pretty heated argument a while ago before we come on. We were talking about sequencing genetic genes and CRISPR and DNA strands. Ken thinks my math is a little bit off on that, and he's going to explain why that is. So go ahead, Ken. Take it away.
Well, probably because you got that Missouri education is the reason your math was off a little bit, man. The only thing worse than Missouri education is probably getting a good old Tennessee education, public education.
At least we didn't get a Mississippi one.
That's right. That'd be worse. Arkansas.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Holly, thanks for hopping in here.
There's Holly.
Yeah.
Hey.
So, but yeah, we got an extra special show for you guys. I guess it's probably been a month or so ago. Me and Ken somehow, you know how we wonder topics. Somehow the Monkees came up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was because we were talking about songs with places in them, and I asked you about the last train to Clarksville, and you talked about your friend Craig, who was a monster Monkees fan.
Yeah, he sure is. I don't know of anybody that's more of a Monkees fan than Craig.
Yeah.
Craig Murphy.
Yeah. But you said I could probably get him to come on and we can talk all about the Monkees. And I was like, that'd be fantastic. So,
or I guess we can listen and he can talk about them. I'll be honest, man. I had to, since we was having him on here, I had to go read up on the Monkees.
Yeah.
And kind of get my facts straight on them and just learn about them a little bit, but nothing like Craig. I'm just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Taylor says hi too. Hi, Taylor.
Oh, hey, Taylor.
I'll let you know.
How you doing tonight?
I'll let you know, Ken. Taylor has her bag packed already to go. She's excited to come see you and Mary this weekend. So,
man, I can't wait till y'all get out here.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good time.
It'll be a good time.
Yeah.
Side note on
127
yards though.
Yeah. Side note on that. Next Sunday we won't have an episode, but we'll probably try to squeeze one in while we're at your house or something. We'll figure that out. So, so just bear with us.
Yeah.
So we got Arnie and Doug in here too. So we got Monkees with the 2 E's this time. So
yeah, mm-hmm.
yeah. So let's not waste any more time and pull up our resident Monkee expert, our friend Craig Murphy. So, hey, Craig. I got you on mute. Huh?
How's doing?
Doing good. How are you doing, man? Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Like I said, talking to you guys offline, I never run away from a conversation about the Monkees. It's usually the opposite way. People usually, okay, that's enough, and take off running.
Well,
you get me going on the Monkees.
That's why I started a Christmas podcast years ago, was because people got tired of me talking about Christmas all the time. So,
no, I feel you.
Yeah. So before we get too deep in the Monkees, I'm really interested in you, and I'm a fan of things too. But how did it seem like you get attached to the Monkees to become such a mega fan? What was your first memories of them?
Probably the first mini renaissance for the Monkees was like 1976. So that would be me at 4 years old.
Uh-huh.
So some of my earliest music memories are the Monkees. They were into syndication and reruns, the TV show.
Hmm.
Arista Records had put out a greatest hits album that put them back in the Billboard Top 40 for the first time in nearly a decade. And some of my early memories of music were listening to that album. So just like anything anybody has a lifelong passion for, it goes back to the context of it and nostalgia.
Hmm.
Me and Ken have had many talks about Elvis Presley,
Yeah.
and I know that's
Hmm.
one of his favorite things, and that also comes from being alive at a certain time.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
if you were alive and remember the day Elvis Presley died, that puts it into a context that people who came around later can never understand. So, I mean,
Right.
when I was born, I mean, the Monkees, the Beatles, these bands had literally only been broken up for a year or two.
Yeah.
So they're still fresh. They were
Hmm.
still being played on the radio. You throw into the context of the Monkees having a TV show. Um, as a child, it just gets a different spectrum to it. So
Yeah.
it's something that's just kind of stuck with me, you
Yeah.
know. And then, of course, years later, when MTV picked it up, and they had a much bigger renaissance,
Yeah.
and I've just really stuck with them my whole life. So,
Yeah. I get that because I remember watching them in syndication. I think they were on Nickelodeon and as a kid. And, even though I knew the show was like from the 60s, as a kid, I still thought the band was together, you know,
no, yeah,
because,
Yeah.
because I saw them on TV every day, over at my grandparents' house and while they were watching me during the summer. And, so I always just, that's a great point about having a TV show. It's like, it was something different that other bands didn't have at the time.
no,
So,
yeah. And as a kid, you don't get into these, oh, is this a real band?
mhm,
Is this this? You just know what you know. And
mhm,
what I knew was, here's this TV show, and here are these albums by this group called the Monkees that my brothers and sisters have. And so years later, when I started hearing about, oh, well, this is what really went on, it's just like, oh, who cares?
mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
who really cares? I mean,
yeah,
the TV show will last forever. These
Yeah.
a fantastic catalog of songs written by some of the greatest songwriters in America, and they will last forever. So
What years was the show on? Was it
66 and
66?
67, just
Okay.
two
Yeah.
seasons.
Yeah.
So, and hard to believe,
yeah.
you
That is
know.
Yeah.
hard to believe. I thought it would be
Um,
more
It
than
is.
that.
Yeah.
well, it's funny because Mike Nesmith was always kind of given a hard time for not being as involved with it,
Hmm.
or not really putting as much stake in it as the others. And he has a book called Infinite Tuesday that he came out with, I'm thinking maybe around 2016 or so. And he very just a little bit about the Monkees, and that's it. And
Mm.
that's where I was just like, okay, if you're almost 80 years old and the Monkees was 2 years, that'd be like us going on and on and on about middle school.
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of
Yeah.
puts it in perspective. It's just,
Yeah.
if you look at a 2 year period of your life and you're 80 years old, what's that 2 years really mean to you? And it
yeah,
obviously didn't mean as much to him as it did the others. But that's not to say, I mean, he did come into his own later on
hmm,
before his death. The last 10 years he spent pretty committed to the Monkees and really appreciated the give and take with the fans. And
yeah,
I just don't think he had ever seen what it meant to the fans as much as he did in that last 10 years of his life.
yeah.
So,
Right.
He had that
And
whiteout business to build.
exactly.
Yeah,
he sure
Exactly.
did.
And
Yeah.
that too,
uh-huh.
when you look at the years and years of them touring without him, that was their income.
Yeah,
He didn't really need that income.
right.
Mike
So,
Nesmith
so,
was not. Yeah, go ahead.
so can you tell the story about the whiteout? Because Todd just mentioned the whiteout. I read something about it, but there's people
Yeah,
listening that
so
might not know anything about it.
so his mother was a secretary and not a good one. So she would make a lot of mistakes in typing. And so she didn't feel like, hey, I'm tired of having to retype these things. And so she invented liquid paper in order to, hey, I wrote this, let me just
Right.
paint over that word, retype it. She ended up selling the patent to Gillette for millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And when she passed away, Mike Nesmith was the sole inheritor.
Oh wow.
Hmm.
She set up a foundation called the Gideon Foundation, which was meant to
Hmm.
set up for arts and specifically for women in the arts. And half of the money went to that, with the idea that Mike would facilitate that, and the other half went to him. And
Hmm.
he did very well with that money.
Yeah. Sounds like she was an
Well,
artist trying to do a desk job to make ends meet. So,
Oh yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
yeah.
And it is weird reading his book because he has a lot of respect for working women,
Hmm.
but he also was very open about kind of being a womanizer,
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird little,
Yeah.
dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, before we get too far, could you explain kind of what was the controversy about the Monkees, like not being able to play their instruments and all that kind of, what the big deal was?
It really wasn't. It shouldn't have been a big deal, the Wrecking Crew. And, there's a fantastic documentary about the Wrecking Crew that you can
Yeah.
check out probably anywhere. And it was very common practice that a lot of bands in the 60s used session musicians.
Hmm.
So the Monkees were no exception. The difference being is that the Monkees' first album specifically was meant to be a soundtrack to a TV show. I don't think they were trying to fool anybody into thinking they were a real band, because they weren't. But there was a lot of hatred toward the Monkees from bands that had been working at it for years. Like, oh, these guys just got thrown together and put in this. And to
Hmm.
me, it was just all confusion about what the Monkees were. And the Monkees were a multimedia project. It was a TV show, cross pollinated with albums, cross pollinated with a live act going out on the road, promoting the TV show, promoting the albums. All of these things work together to promote each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, they weren't. I don't feel like they were ever really trying to hide it, but when it came out, it was just a big deal. There was a lot of big backlash on it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so they really fought for control to put out an album where they got to pick the songs, they got to play the instruments. They ultimately saw that it was hard work, and really in the '60s they only did one album where they were a band because they saw they don't have time.
Hmm.
They were in the recording studio all day. They were in the TV studio all day filming their show. Then they were rehearsing for 10 hours a day to play a tour. And you look at things like Mickey Dolenz was an actor who got hired to play the drummer. So when it came time to go out on the road, guess what? He had to learn to play drums. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's not an easy thing to do. Hey,
No.
you're the drummer. Go play
And
drums.
and
So,
sing at the same time.
and sing at the same
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
That's crazy. That always blows me away, man. When I see a drummer that sings, I mean, how do they do
Well,
that, man?
there's not a lot that, like you got Levon Helm from the band. He could do
Hmm.
it. Don Henley could do
Yeah.
it. Phil Collins, as excellent as a drummer as he was, for the most part, if he was singing, he was not behind that drum set.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
he get up and walk around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, still nothing beats Geddy Lee singing, playing bass, and playing keyboards with his foot at the
that's
same time.
right. Don't forget moving the microphone with his nose.
Yeah. That was probably an accident.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
But, so let's talk about the founding, of the Beatles. Like,
The
what was
Monkees.
yeah, the Monkees, the
Ah,
Beatles. I'm sorry, I've got so many questions running through my mind for the Monkees. Now it was a TV show. Who was the first member? I always understood it was Davy Jones, but I'm not 100% sure.
there's some conjecture on that.
Hmm.
Davy Jones was already under contract.
Okay.
So the way he always told it, and there's the key, but the way he always told it was that when they picked up that project, they knew he was going to be in it. It
Hmm.
was created by two guys, Bob Raffleson and Bert Schneider.
Uh-huh.
And these guys went on after the Monkees. They made several movies. They did Easy Rider, 12 Easy Pieces. They used the success of the Monkees very, very well. They originally came up with the idea of a folk band. In the early 60s, folk music was the big thing. So they had this idea about doing a TV show about a traveling folk band and all their adventures. And then when A Hard Day's Night came out, they were like, oh, this is what it needs to be. It needs to be a rock and roll band. Bert Schneider, his dad was the president of Columbia Pictures. So it was not very hard for them to get the green light to at least film a pilot and see how it went. But the idea is, yeah, Davy Jones was already under contract. So as soon as that project was greenlit, he was in. Mike Nesmith, similarly, had already recorded some singles for the Colpix label, which was a subsidiary of Columbia. Mickey Dolenz, being a child actor, he was on a show in the 50s called Circus Boy. So yeah, there was a big cattle call for audition. These guys really didn't have to go to it. I think Mike's the only one who went to the cattle call. Davy Jones was already in. He was a child star from England. He did the original version of Oliver. He was the Artful Dodger on the original London version of Oliver. Mickey Dolenz, obviously, child star. He had an agent. He didn't have to go to the cattle call. Mike Nesmith, I think, did go to the cattle call. Peter Tork, the interesting thing about him is he never went to any of these auditions. His roommate, Stephen Stills from Chrysler, Stills and Nash, did. And the story goes that they loved Stephen Stills, but he did not have the look for TV. That they were like, hey, we really like you. And kind of jokingly were like, hey, is there anybody who looks just like you, but with better hair and teeth? And he said, well, actually, yes. My roommate, Peter Tork. And that's how Peter got the gig.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool.
That's funny. Yeah.
Stephen Stills.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he played on some of the Monkee stuff in the later years. So did Neil Young. A lot of great people ended up playing on some of these Monkees out. So.
Hey, Edna, how you doing, man? All the way from Indonesia.
Indonesia?
Yeah. Yeah. By way of Ireland. So he's our resident world traveler. He keeps us informed of what's going on worldwide. But yeah, it's good to have you in here, Edna. Because I had also heard that Davy was at it later because of the popularity of the Beatles and the British invasion. But then,
he was already he had already recorded an album for these guys. He was already under lock and key. He was already being prepped. But you are right about that. He's a British guy, good looking guy. The popularity of the Beatles, they were going to make a star out of Davy Jones one way or the other, and they just figured the Monkees was the best vehicle for that.
So the Monkees was the American answer to the Beatles, pretty much. Is what it was, right?
And the Beatles were the Fab Four, the Monkees were the pre-Fab Four. They were prefabricated. So,
okay.
Well, it's really not too different than the way they make bands nowadays. I listened to a documentary on making of NSYNC, and it was pretty much the same thing.
I mean, like I said, I mean, a lot of the things that people think of negativities or controversies about them, when you put them in the context of the entertainment world, they're just not.
Yeah. Very few bands start in their garage and then all their members stay remaining.
Keith Richards from the Stones, he always maintained that Led Zeppelin wasn't a real band because they didn't have to fight their way up. Right. Jimmy Page kind of owned the rights to the name the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds fell apart. He put together the new Yardbirds. They kicked total ass and they became Led Zeppelin. They didn't have to fight their way up the system.
Yeah.
They kind of came to, already fully formed. Hey, we're good. No matter what we do, we're going to be good.
Yeah,
well, they did happen to be. Yeah, they ended up being like a lot better than good. So.
Yeah. That's
well. Speaking of the Rolling Stones and the Led Zeppelin, and all that, I was reading because, like I told you, man, I'm not going to pretend like I know all about the Monkees because I don't. So I had to read up on it, and I saw that. Was it 1967 maybe? That their albums outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined.
It's funny.
Is that true?
Because
is that true?
Well, I've always, Mike Nesmith claims that that's not true, that that's a lie that he perpetrated. Now that's a story he didn't tell till years and years later, but he maintained there in the last 10 years that no, he's like, no, I told that to a reporter just to see if it would get legs. And sure enough, 50
Mm,
years later, it still had legs. So,
okay. Yeah.
but I mean, they were immensely popular. They had, even we were talking off screen earlier about the album Headquarters. Um, that's an album that had absolutely no singles released off of it in America. It debuted at number one. The next week, Sergeant Pepper's came out, and it remained at number two, right under Sergeant Pepper's for
Mm,
the entire summer of 1967. Um,
okay.
but then again, I mean, when you've got a TV show doing your advertising for you, you really don't need singles,
Hmm.
and that was proof
Yeah.
positive of that.
Mm-hmm. Because that was the year they came out with what was it? I'm a Believer. Is that when
Yeah.
they came out in '67?
Like their first album came out in 66, and they literally came out with like three albums in 67. Just every three
Really?
or 4 months, here's
Hmm.
an album. Yeah. And
No
that's what a
kidding.
lot of these well, that's
Yeah.
what if you look at it, that's what most bands in the 60s did. You had to put out singles, but you also had to constantly be putting out albums. You look at how many albums the Beatles put out. Well, they were only recording for, a decade at best.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The Stones in their first 10 years probably, I mean, they put out a ton of albums. These guys were constantly in the studio putting out material.
Hmm. Well, man, how many times have you seen the Monkees in person, in concert?
16, 16.
16 times. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But that is that I have to clear this up. I never got to see all four of them.
Ah,
The opportunity to see all four Monkees in the United States beyond 1968 was very limited. I think you really, in the United States, since 1968, you might have had three opportunities to see them as a four piece, and none of those opportunities would have been full shows.
oh
So,
Okay.
wow.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
Well, who was the most talented musically out of all of them?
Peter Tork.
Peter was?
Really?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, Peter, he was a classically trained musician. He played guitar, he played banjo, he played bass, he played keyboards. If it had a string, he could play it. I think he also played French horn. Very talented musician.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people don't understand that about him. And there's another interesting thing. When you think about the TV show, people say, "Oh, well, the bass player was Peter Tork." Realistically, he played bass. If you look at their original albums, I think he played bass on maybe one song. In reality, he was a keyboard player.
Okay.
And besides that, he also played a lot of guitar on some of their stuff.
Yeah.
But for the TV show, he was the bass player. But for the recording entity that was the Monkees, he really was not the bass player.
Yeah. It's funny because he's the most low key personality on
Oh
the
yeah,
TV show.
and that his personality on the TV show, by all accounts, that was not him. He
Right.
was not a dummy. He was a very smart man. From what I have seen and heard, could be kind of a difficult man.
Well,
So,
that
Oh, really?
but he was,
se-
Okay.
yeah,
seems like that's
he was never,
yeah. It seems like that's the way it goes. It's like whoever plays the moron is usually like super gifted and talented. It's like when Woody Harrelson was on Cheers, when he was playing that
yeah,
bumpkin from Indiana, and then he
yeah,
comes and he's like this incredible actor that has all this range. And every time
Yeah.
I see him, I still think of Woody from Cheers, So,
and I'm sure that's something Peter probably struggled with.
yeah.
That he played the dummy, and that goes to tell about his acting talent. When you look at Mike and Peter were musicians. Davey and Mickey were more actors.
Uh-huh.
But if you look at that show, you would never know that these are guys that had never met before the show
Right.
started taping.
Right.
That,
Mm.
because they
Yeah.
were great actors. The
Yeah.
chemistry is there. You'd think these guys had known each other for years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So for those that maybe are unfamiliar with the TV show, let's run down like their personalities on the show. We talked about Peter kind of being the dim one, and stuff. So let's run down the other ones. What would you classify Mickey as?
Mickey was the wise guy. always quick to be doing imitations or, just
Yeah.
freak out at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Then you had Davy, and the big trope there was every week a new girl would fall in love with Davy, and they'd
Yeah.
stare at each other, and the stars would shine in their eyes.
Yeah.
And then you had Mike, who that personality on the show is harder to peg down,
Yeah.
because sometimes they might try to play him like he's a little dim. Sometimes they might try to play him like he has this wisdom that's beyond his age. Sometimes he's just, I would say, if anything, he's the smart monkey,
Yeah.
I guess you would say.
Yeah. The best I remember, to me, he was always seemed like he had played the straight guy, as
Yeah.
far as,
Yeah.
kind of
That's a
like the
good way
Dean
to put it.
Martin, the Dean Martin to, Jerry Lewis kind of thing,
Yeah, if
so,
you had to have a straight man out of the four, I would say it
mhm,
probably was Mike.
yeah.
And was there a leader of them? I mean, was one of them a leader of the band, like a normal band, or were they just all four just
I
part of it?
think I think if you look at as far as them, once they started kind of pulling the reins away from the producers and having more control, I'd say it was Mike because he's the one who
Oh,
led that movement. I don't think Davey and Mickey really cared either way. They were actors being paid to act, but they went along with Mike. They let him lead that ship. And Peter, being a musician, definitely went along with Mike on that ride. So when it comes to that part of it, Mike, when you look at them as a live act from the audience, it's Davey. Even after Davey died, I remember Mike Nesmith saying, the Monkees is Davy Jones. We're his cheerleaders.
Hmm.
They're
oh wow.
he is,
Okay.
but because people see Davy and think, well, he's the front man,
Hmm.
and he really wasn't. I mean, the lead singer of the Monkees was always Mickey Dolenz,
Hmm.
Hmm.
but the image you always have is Davy up front, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, from that perspective, Davy, but from a recording perspective, probably Mike.
Nice. So, which monkey's your favorite?
That's a I would have to be Mike. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it would have to be Mike Nesmith, just for different reasons.
Yeah.
Nothing necessarily against any of the other ones. They all, uh, you know, when Mike came back to the band after Davey died, it was a pleasure to finally get to see him doing all these Monkee songs, to finally see him embrace them. As a songwriter, I've always loved Mike's stuff. I've always liked the fact that I always felt like when I was coming up that I was pretty limited at my guitar playing.
Hmm.
And Mike Nesmith could use the same six chords and write 75 songs, and they would never sound the same.
Yeah.
And so I
Hmm.
appreciated the heck out of that. And also he was just funny. Like they he had an album, right after the Monkees broke up, he had a hit single called Joanne. It's the only top 40 hit any of the Monkees had as a solo artist. And so his record label, about three albums in, were like, hey, you got to have some hits or we can't keep doing this. So his next album was literally just him on guitar and his pedal steel player Orville J. Red Rhodes on pedal steel, and they named the album, and the hits just keep on coming, just to kind of be smartasses, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
It is. It is great.
Yeah.
And then
Pedal
like
steel.
there's a later Monkey song called Good Clean Fun, and same thing. They were kind of getting on to them about, hey, after the show got canceled, they still had this recording contract, and the record label was not too happy with some of their songs they were submitting. And were like, Mike, you don't need to be singing about this or that. People want to hear about good, clean fun. So he wrote a song, and even though it has nothing to do with the lyrics, was just like, oh, I'll call it Good Clean Fun.
That's great.
Oh, really?
That's great. I love it when bands do that. So,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, even Mickey, back to Headquarters, there's a song on that album called Randy Scouse Git, and it was never released as a single here, but in England they decided they wanted to release it as a single. I think it ended up going to either number one or number two in England, but they were like, you can't call it Randy Scouse Git because that's labeled as offensive. You have to come up with an alternate title. So they released it in England under the title alternate title.
Oh, oh,
that's
man.
great. Ken, do
Yeah.
you have a favorite monkey?
Um, Man, it'd probably have to be Mickey. I mean, just because I like his voice.
Yeah.
To me, his voice
Yeah.
is the Monkees pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
I know other guys can sing too, but I like Mickey for his voice and the fact now that know that he learned to play the drums and sing at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a
And
lot of work.
he was always musically inclined. He's actually a really good guitar player, a
Mhm.
really good guitar
Is
Yeah.
he? Okay.
Oh yeah, when he
That-
was when he came out for to do the Monkees, he had already been in a few bands where he was the front man and the guitar player. So
Mhm,
he's no slouch musically at all,
Mhm.
at all.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
as you know, back to his voice, I mean, I maintain this is probably one of the greatest rock and roll voices of all time,
Yeah.
especially for the
yeah.
60s. And as somebody who still, I've seen Mickey on his own maybe 5 times as recently as last year, and this guy still has the pipes. His voice
Mhm.
has not faltered. He can still hit those notes. He doesn't have to lower the key to hit those notes. He is still a very good voice.
So when he sings "Last Train to Clarksville," he still sounds just like it
He's
did,
still
huh?
got it. Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
and his band, he's got a fantastic backing band that I mean, they nail it. They nail this stuff.
Yeah.
So he's still touring, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah, he is still touring.
Wow. How old is
We
he?
took, geez, he's got to be like 78, 77.
Jeez.
They're pushing it. They're pushing 80, or he
Yeah.
is pushing 80. He's the only one left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's still. I took my son to see him in Orlando last year. They came. They started their. He actually started his tour at the Ryman 2 years ago. We went to that. So yeah, if you ever get a chance to see Mickey, you won't be disappointed. It's a really good show.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it was late 2000s. There was a CMT reality contest show called Gone Country with Big Rich was the host, and Mickey was on one of the seasons.
No,
And I remember watching it, and it's just all these music. I think like Sebastian Bach from Skid Row was on there. Someone from American Idol that didn't win was, and some other people. And he ended up being my favorite on the show. For one, I always enjoyed the stuff he did, but two, the respect that he had for everybody else was. I don't know if he's that kind and that respectful in real life. I like to think so, but he was just so humble the whole time. And I remember there was one time when it's like they went to like the Country Music Hall of Fame and stuff, and he was just so like reverent to all those that came before him. And then there was another one, I think it was Vince Gill was like a guest, you um, coach or whatever, and he was just so, even though he was older than everybody else, and he was just such a class act, and it just won me over completely, even though I don't think he won on the show, but you
yeah. I
know,
mean, that's one thing. Like he, as far as I know, I've never caught him bad mouthing any of the other Monkees, and
yeah,
you can't really say that about the rest of them.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
what
Well, hey,
he
hey,
thinks privately, but he never publicly said anything bad about
yeah.
any of them.
Yeah, the thing I
yeah.
remember about that show is they were at one of the bar. I guess John Rich has a bar downtown Nashville, like everybody else does. But and they all came up to do a song, and he came up to do "Last Train to Clarksville," and the whole place just went bananas, like more
Oh, I'm
bananas than
sure.
for everybody than anybody else that went up there. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean,
yeah,
I'm a believer. Last Train to Clarksville, Pleasant Valley Sunday. I'm not your stepping stone. I mean, this guy's
yeah,
got hits that he could pull out of his pocket at
yeah.
any time that everybody's going to know.
Uh,
Well,
definitely.
hey, man, real quick, tell us about what your wife got you for your
Oh,
birthday just a couple years ago with
well, a
Mike.
couple of things. First off, this was, it was really awesome because literally like the week before my birthday, Winston, my son, was like, Mommy's freaking out because she doesn't know what to get you for your birthday. And I was just like, well, she better figure it out. My birthday's in 6 days. What do you mean she doesn't know? And so literally on my birthday, like she played it right too. She like got me some soap. Uh, and I'm just like, okay, great, some soap. And then she got me this, which is ridiculous, but this big old book on the Monkees.
Oh, nice.
It's written by a
Hmm.
guy named Andrew Sandoval, who is probably like the greatest hero there is for the Monkees in the last like 30 years. Look how thick it is.
Very
And
nice.
Oh my goodness.
this literally covers every single day that the Monkees were a band in the 60s.
Oh wow.
Every single day.
My
But
goodness.
inside of that was a slip of paper saying, hey, your video chat with Mike Nesmith is August 14th at 11 a.m. And that was my birthday. And so I was just like, oh my gosh. He's like, yep. So I'm going to take Winston to soccer. Uh, in 2 hours, you're going to have a video chat with Mike Nesmith. And so that was really cool.
Oh wow.
To just
Wow.
sit there and talk to him. I think it was for 45 minutes. And it was just, especially, after that, we went and saw them on their farewell tour when it was just him and Mickey. And seeing Mike on stage, it was very evident that was the last time I was ever going to see this man on stage. And he died very shortly after the tour wrapped up. So that made it even more awesome that I got to sit there and just talk to him.
Yeah.
And being the fan I am, I knew he didn't want to just talk about the Monkees. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
we had other things we could talk about, and so it was
Yeah.
just a really neat thing. And he signed this for my birthday.
Oh
This
wow.
First National Band. That's his band after
Okay.
the Monkees. Michael
Okay.
Nesmith and the First National Band. And he signed one for my son Winston too that I got framed up for him. And no, it was just neat. Just and one thing I talked to him about, because Mike knew that some of their songs he wasn't a fan of. Like I remember there was a song of theirs called "I'm Gonna Buy Me a Dog," and he said, I'm never gonna get excited about doing "I'm Gonna Buy Me a Dog" per se, and so that got us on the topic of. Maybe they should have an album called "The Worst of the Monkees," and he got a kick out of
Yeah.
that. Just put
Yeah.
out an album of like, here's the 10 worst songs the Monkees did. Because
That
one
would
good
be
thing of
something.
well, if you're a true fan of a band, you've got to realize that not everything your band puts out is going to be good. And
Yeah.
the
Right.
Monkees are no exception. They had some stinkers. So
Yeah. That's fantastic. So if someone didn't, let's say alien landed, didn't know anything about the Monkees, what album would you give them to listen to first?
headquarters. Yeah.
Headquarters.
Yeah. And not, it's an interesting album because it is literally pretty much just them and their producer. Their producer played most of the bass on the album. Their producer for it was a guy named Chip Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
Chip Douglas had played with the Turtles and had done the vocal arrangements for Happy Together. So when they were able to wrestle control of their music, Mike Nesmith, even though Chip Douglas had never been a producer, for some reason Mike was like, I want Chip Douglas. And so they went in there, and it's just a really simple and honest album. There's several albums on there with no drums, where it's Davy Jones driving the song with the tambourine or maybe some light percussion. Some really nice acousticy stuff. Mickey plays some guitar on some of those songs as well, and just a really nicely put together album.
All right. So I need to get headquarters. That's the one I'll be
Oh yeah.
looking out for on vinyl.
And
Of
the
course.
second one would be Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. That's the album that came out right after it. Still the vein of them kind of being musically involved, but Mickey only plays drums on like one or two songs. They
Mhm.
have session musicians joining them, so it's a mixture. It's like a hybrid of being a studio band with
Yeah.
some studio musicians,
Is that all
but they're
their?
still firmly.
Yeah,
Hmm?
that's all. Is that all their signs that they named them after?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they did Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones because Davy Jones and Mike Nesmith have the same birth month, so
Ah.
it's kind of like yeah. So
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
and it's a
Man,
great album
one
too.
one of your favorite I don't guess the favorite song because everybody does it, but you sent me a link to a Christmas video that they did,
Yeah.
and it was the Christmas song. And man,
Oh yeah.
they had that pedal steel on there that you was talking about a while ago. You think was
Yes.
that the guy you was talking about playing this pedal steel on that? You
No,
think?
the guy on that, his old pedal steel player was a guy named Red Rhodes, and I think Red died in the 90s.
Mhm.
So Mike maybe around the same time he started touring with the Monkees, he went out on solo tour and had oh my God, what's his name? Plays with Marty Stewart.
The guitar player,
The pedal, yeah,
Vaughn.
plays guitar, pedal, Scruggs,
Oh, yeah. Not
Chris
Earl Scruggs,
Scruggs.
but Chris
Yeah,
Scruggs. That
Chris.
sure is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So he had Chris Scruggs on tour with him, and then I guess there was a show that Chris couldn't make it, so Chris had this guy named Pete Finney sit in for him, and that's who played with Mike until he died. He toured with the
Okay.
Monkees whenever Mike was with them until he died, and that's Pete. That's Pete Finney on the pedal steel on that Christmas album,
Okay. All right.
and he's
Chris
fantastic too. He's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Chris Scruggs is awesome. We used to go see
Chris
him
Scruggs
play at
ain't
the.
Chris Scruggs ain't no slouch.
No,
I
man.
tell you that.
Whenever I lived there in town in Nashville, we used to go to what was the name of that place? The Stone Fox Five or something like that. It was a little bar there. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And I'm freezing
Oh,
up.
we
Can
good?
y'all see me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we see you.
it looks like I'm freezing up on mine,
Mm.
but I'll just keep talking. But
Yeah,
yeah, we used to go. Yeah, I think it's good now. But we used to go see him play over there. He had a band, and I mean there would be like 20 people there. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man! Come see this band,
oh
man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now I tell you, one of the best live shows I ever saw was Marty and the Superlatives backing up Chris Hillman and Roger McGuinn from the Byrds. They
Mm.
were doing
Well,
the
that's cool.
Sweethearts of the Rodeo album in its entirety at the Ryman, and
Oh my
my
gosh.
God, yeah, that was ridiculous,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It, yeah, I've
I,
got that album, man. I love that.
seeing Marty and them tear up behind those guys,
Yeah.
it was
Mm.
just stupid.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I tell Todd, we talk all the time, and I'll say, yeah, we used to go to this place and see these guys and go here and see these guys in these little small dives or whatever. And it sounds like I'm making it up, but, and I don't know about Nashville now because I've been out there for a couple of years, but I know back in the
Back in the
day, man,
day, yeah, back in the
yeah,
day, you
yeah,
could walk. It was nothing to walk down the street in Nashville and run into Hank Jr. It was
yeah.
Yeah.
nothing to be at the Great Escape back in the day and Johnny Cash be over there thumbing through the albums.
Mhm.
And people left them alone.
Well,
People did not
it,
bother these celebrities.
and like that little dive, the Station Inn, it's down
Yeah,
there in the Gulch. Now we used to go there, pay $10 and get in to see Chris Stapleton play with the Steel Drivers, and sit
yeah,
5 feet from him. There'd be like 100 people in there max.
yeah.
And that was a common thing. But I don't think it's like that anymore there.
No, no. It's
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell's going on with Nashville anymore. Like I only go if there's a concert, and even then I'm just like, oh my God, this is awful.
Yeah.
This is awful.
So,
Yeah.
so were there any names of people that maybe worked behind the scenes with the Monkees before they themselves made it big?
Like I said, the guys who created it, Bert Schneider and Bob Raffleson, these guys ended up making a big splash in the movie world. There was a guy named James Frawley who was a writer and a director. There was Paul Mazursky. So a lot of like people into the TV world and movie
Hmm.
world got their start doing the Monkees.
Yeah.
As far as the studio side of it, like I said, most of it you had your wrecking crew.
Hmm.
So you had James Burton on guitar, you had Glenn Campbell on guitar, you had Hal Blaine on the drums,
Yeah.
you had Joe Osborne on the
Yeah.
bass,
Carol Kay.
Jerry Sheff, one of Elvis's old bass players. He did some stuff with the Monkees on bass. So not really like that's where they got their start or anything,
Yeah.
but then
I
like I
just,
said, Stephen Stills, Neil Young, Ry Cooder, these guys all did some stuff with the Monkees.
yeah. Yeah. I didn't know if maybe there was like an up and coming songwriter or something that Monkees
There's this
maybe.
guy named Bill Chadwick. If you ever look into him, Bill Chadwick did a lot of stuff with the Monkees. John Stewart from the Kingston Trio, he
Hmm.
had a top 40 hit in the 70s called Gold, if you remember it. But that's the guy who wrote Daydream Believer.
Okay.
Harry Nilsson. Harry Nilsson, one of the great American
Mhm.
songwriters. The
Hmm.
Monkees were really instrumental on getting him up and going. he had sold a couple of songs to the Monkees, and when Mike finally orchestrated that they were going to record it, the word is that this guy was working at a bank, and he told him, he's like, Harry, yeah, you can quit the bank.
Yeah.
Well, man, who was the biggest songwriter out of all of them? Was it Nesmith?
Mike. Yeah, definitely.
Did he ever
Um,
write anything for for like anybody in another genre or anything like any country songs or anything like
I
that?
can't remember the name of it, but he did actually. There is actually a top 40 country hit. I can't remember who it was. You're catching me off guard, but there is a
Uh-oh.
song, a country song that he co-wrote that ended up being a top 40 hit for a female artist.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was, but
Was it?
uh, but when the Monkees first came to be, and he's pitching his songs, and they're like, those don't sound like what we're looking for. These aren't monkey songs. To which he's like, that's stupid. I'm a monkey.
Yeah.
So one of the songs they passed up on was Different Drum, which got picked up by Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Ponies. It became
Mhm.
Okay.
her first big hit. So, he made a ton off of that, and the Monkees could have had that. He really helped launch her career. He's A lot of people would really consider Nesmith like one of the godfathers of that country rock movement that we were talking about with the Birds and the Sweethearts of the Rodeo and things
Like
like
in the
that.
late 60s and early 70s?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
he used his time wisely. He came to Nashville and hired the top brass studio musicians and recorded a bunch of stuff with them. Just knowing, hey, this Monkees thing is about to go south. I'm gonna use the Monkees money to do what I want to do. So Norbert and all those people, the Area 615 session musicians, he cut several tracks with those guys.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
More on the business side now. Who owns all the IP for the Monkees now? Does Mickey own it all by himself, or is it some big corporation?
Rhino Records.
Rhino. Okay.
They bought it.
Yeah.
There was years where they didn't own it. And they were having to licensing it out. They were having to
Mhm.
basically pay. There was also a period, if you remember, after their big MTV revival, that the guys who owned the name the Monkees were like, "Well, we're going to start a show called The New Monkees. So you guys aren't the Monkees anymore. These guys are the new Monkees." So there was actually a period where they offered to sell it to Mike Nesmith because he could afford it,
Right.
and he turned it down. And his reasoning was that the last thing he wanted was to get phone calls in the middle of the night from Peter Tork or Davy Jones saying, "Where's my royalty checks?" So, so
Yeah.
he passed.
Yeah. Yeah. I just didn't know, maybe because now it's big for companies to buy whole catalogs, from these
Oh
artists
yeah,
for insanity amounts of money. I didn't know if they
yeah.
had
I'm pretty
that
sure,
kind.
right? Rhino Records. At first, they were just licensing it out too, but they
Mhm.
finally, I'm pretty sure, just bought it out. They own it now. So
Fantastic. Well, we were talking earlier that their last album was their Christmas album that came out a couple
yeah.
of years back, and Mickey's the only one left. Do you expect anything else from them other than just Mickey keeping it alive?
Possibly. In 2016, they came out with their 50th anniversary album, which was called Good Times, and and believe it or not, I would put it in their top 5 albums. It's a fantastic album. It's a great album, but some of that was archival things that had not been finished up, that they were able to finish up and polish up and put out. So I've heard him say that there's more of that type of stuff in the vaults.
Okay.
Whether or not it'll ever be put out under the name of the Monkees or put out as a new album. They do every now and then. There was 3 albums they came out with back in the day called the Missing Link series, where they
Mm.
dug up through the vaults and put these out. As far as how much is actually left intact to be released, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to ask you about that. I made a footnote about the Missing Links album. I didn't know if you knew about that or what.
Oh yeah,
It's
there
kind of a crazy.
it's pretty neat stuff on there. So,
Yeah.
well, because like there were up until then there were several songs that you'd hear on the TV show that weren't on any albums, and so these Missing Links albums were your first chance to have official copies of these. Some of them had been available through bootlegs for years, but these Missing Links albums come out, it's like, okay, finally, I have an official version of this song that I know from the TV show, but is not on any of the albums. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
Yeah. Wow. So, if you had to put together a Monkees tribute band, who would you put on there?
Like out of me,
whoever.
uh, Peter Buck from REM,
Yeah.
definitely. I really wished that, there was, when they came out with these last few albums in the last decade, the idea was, let's have these mainstream popular people now write these songs. And I wish they'd have done that in the 80s when they had their
Right.
first comeback, because I would have loved to have seen like REM write some songs for the Monkees, or Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers write some
Yeah.
songs for the Monkees.
Yeah.
Even later in the 90s, even Kurt Cobain confessed that he was a Monkees fan, and that, he was influenced a little bit by them as far as a songwriter. As far as like putting together a band out of whoever, I mean, who knows? I would love, obviously Tom Petty's no longer with us. He would have been a
Yeah.
great one. Peter Buck from REM would be a great one.
Yeah.
Dave Grohl, I think Dave Grohl would be fantastic in any capacity in anything he did. So
It does kind of
there's
remind me
that.
of Mickey now that you say that.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
yeah. So Dave would be your drummer.
Oh, yeah, he could be anything.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
he,
All right.
he
Yeah.
pretty much do it all. So
And one more kind of off the wall question: how ecstatic or mad were you when Smash Mouth came out with Daydream Believer?
oh no, I'm a believer. Yeah, their
Yeah, I'm
version
a
of
believer.
it's
Yeah.
terrible. Well, I mean, those guys. I mean, they put out a lot of covers, and more power to them. I think, especially with that one, I think because that's tied with the Shrek
Yeah, it's tight.
soundtrack,
Uh-huh.
and no matter what, I think that ultimately led to a newer generation finding their way to the Monkees version.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't get too mad on that. I mean, I'm a believer. That's a Neil Diamond song in reality. So the Monkees had great success with it, obviously. Um, but I think anytime someone does a cover, especially if it's a hit, it draws attention to the original version that might have been missed by whoever's picking up that cover.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I hate Smash Mouth. I'm just go ahead and say that.
I tried to get
I know.
Ken to cover Smash Mouth Christmas album last year, and he didn't want to do it. So
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
we end up doing
No, man.
yeah, we end up doing Jimmy Buffett's Christmas, one of his first Christmas
There you
albums.
go.
Did,
Which is actually pretty darn good.
it's really
man, believe it or
good.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That and I will not be doing a review on the Garth Brooks Christmas album. I can tell you that right now.
Oh, let me scratch that off the list then for this year.
Yeah, no Garth Brooks, brother. I think I made that clear last week whenever we was talking about Garth Brooks. I'm like, yeah.
I grew up, you was talking about, songs that you heard when you were a kid. My dad worked for our local CBS affiliate here in Southeast Missouri. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, when like Murphy Brown was like the big TV show, he brought home this cassette tape that was like a soundtrack to Murphy Brown, and it was all Motown stuff. And I fell in love with Motown. I'm a monster Motown fan, and the Funk Brothers and all those bands. And there's a song, What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, that I absolutely love. And it's a song that I feel if the right artist got a hold of it today, it could probably be a hit again, because to me, it's so well written. Is there a Monkee song that you feel if the right artist got a hold of it could be a hit again?
That's a tough one. I mean, obviously, I think Daydream Believer. I mean, you go for your go-tos on that one. Like, if someone's going to say, let's cover a Monkee song and make a big hit out of it, they're going to pick one of the songs that were already a big hit. A song that I think is fantastic, that I'd love to see somebody like have great success with, is a song called "Listen to the Band" that Mike Nesmith wrote. Just a great song, fantastic song.
Man, there's a pretty popular bluegrass band called the Grascals, and they covered "Last Train to Clarksville" it's probably been 10 years ago, but they did great on that, man. It sounds really good with bluegrass instrumentation, when it's done right by guys like that. Really
Oh yeah,
good.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, also though, I'd rather see nobody cover the Monkees.
Yeah.
It's just like, leave the Monkees alone. That's
Yeah. It's kind of like that whole
Yeah.
Hollywood remake thing with movies. It's like certain movies you just need to leave alone.
no,
Yeah.
like
Certain songs just leave alone.
I mean,
Um,
same with the Beatles. I don't want to hear anybody else cover the Beatles.
yeah, yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like why? Or Elvis. Don't cover Elvis. There's no need to.
Ma-
You're not going to do it
Craig,
better.
there's a question I want to ask you. I had read one time where Jimi Hendrix opened for the Monkees for
Yeah,
I don't know 5 6 times. I don't know how many it was, but he actually got booed
yeah,
because people were wanting
yeah.
the
It wasn't
Monkees.
long.
Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. Mickey and Peter saw him at the Monterey Festival and loved it, and were like, "Man, we got to get this guy on the road with us." But if the Monkees, not saying anything bad, but from their TV show, they were, and their music was considered somewhat bubblegum. So their crowd was mainly kids going up to like high school age. And so when you have this guy up there setting his guitar on fire and playing with his teeth, it scared the hell out of these kids.
Mhm.
Mm.
And so, Mickey used to do a bit in his show where he'd be like, "Here's what it was like when Jimi Hendrix would open for us," and the band would start playing Purple Haze with Mickey singing, and then all of a sudden the band you got drowned out by them all saying, "We want Davy, we want Davy." And so they
Yeah.
said after about 5 or 6 gigs, Hendrix was just like, forget this. Thanks for the thanks, but no thanks. I'm out.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That
I
was two
wondered if
different
that
But
was true.
crowds.
my Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I see where they were excited about having him on the show, but I mean, you'd think somebody would have been like, "Really, guys? I mean, it's not going to work."
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, Craig, man, I really appreciate you joining us here on the porch. It's been fascinating, and I just love your enthusiasm for the Monkees. And now you make me want to deep dive into them a
You
little bit
should.
more.
You should. Like I said, start with Headquarters, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones, the soundtrack to their motion picture Head. It only has like 5 songs on it, but it's their best 5 songs they ever recorded. And then their 2016 50th anniversary album, Good Times, is honestly nothing short of a masterpiece. It was put together by a guy named Adam Schlesinger from the band Fountains of Wayne, and he passed away during COVID. You might recognize him. He's the guy who wrote the song "That Thing You Do" from the
Yeah,
movie "That Thing You Do."
yeah,
And
great
just
movie.
it has a song on there called "Me and Magdalena," which
Mhm.
the first time I heard literally gave me goosebumps. Just a beautiful, beautiful song. So plenty to go diving in. And if you ever
Yeah,
need any guideposts on where to go, feel free to hit me up.
yeah, I definitely will. I am a yard seller, estate seller fan. In fact, we're heading out to stay with Ken and Mary for the 127 this weekend. So I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for some Monkees vinyl and
Sweet.
see what I can find. But
Yeah.
thanks again for being our first guest. And we'll have to have,
Hey man, thanks for having me. Like I
yeah,
said, I can sit here and do this all night. So
yeah.
All
Well, I
if
right.
you ever want to have
appreciate
a
it.
Yeah.
sequel, if there's ever a sequel, give me a call.
We
All right, Craig.
definitely,
Thank you,
we
buddy.
definitely will. And guys, let us know your thoughts about the Monkees and favorite memories. Send us a direct message on social media on the porch pod. You can email us at joinusontheporch@gmail.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. And just keep your eyes on socials for next week's show. We won't have one Sunday, I know for sure. May have one Saturday, Friday or Saturday. We'll see how that goes. But
Right.
appreciate everybody joining us. Ken, take us home.
Yeah, I want to thank Craig Murphy, our friend and Monkee super fan, for joining us tonight, buddy. I appreciate it. It was a great show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks.
Yep. And I want to thank all our listeners for joining us here on the porch with Todd and Ken. And we're gone.